today my guest is Mary Ruddick. Among many other things, Mary is a researcher, but I'm going to let her tell you all about herself, what she's been up to recently, because she's been off doing some very interesting research with some very interesting folks. So pretty much that's enough from me. Mary, take it away. Tell us all about you, your background, what it is you've been doing just recently. Regale us, basically.
Sure. So I'm a nutritionist like yourself and an avid researcher. I really love to bring to light ancestral nutrition because I think it quite directly disproves many of the myths that are being spread around food and health and nutrition. And so just in this last month, I was with 9 different groups, 9 different tribes in Africa, in both Tanzania and Uganda, studying with carnivore groups and hunter-gatherers and farmers, the whole mix, and comparing their health, seeing how they're doing, and all of that. And then, of course, documenting it so that people can see it on video, because I think it is so hard to deny if we see something with our own eyes. So that is what I've been up to most recently. I got into this field by accident. I was working at a field station when I was very young and got very sick. And it was in reversing that illness through diets, through really intensive, counterintuitive and counter pyramid diets, that I put all those conditions into remission. And so after that, I ended up going back to school for nutrition and setting up practice. And since that time, I've really specialized in hard to treat conditions. I love the easy ones too, but usually I work with the hard to treat, the peculiar, the difficult to respond conditions. And then during my free time, so the evenings, the morning, and the weekends, I do my research.
Awesome, awesome. So when you were over there, did you run into that strange American honey eating chap while you were there? He was there about the same time, wasn't he?
I did. In fact, he was supposed to go on the trip with us actually, but because he and Dr. Anthony Gustin both, I think they were just floored by their experience, so they came a little bit early, and then they were supposed to come with us for the next 2 weeks. But I think they were so enamored with their experience that they headed home. So they quit early and went home. I think they wanted to get their message out. So we only saw them for one night.
Okay, cool, cool. All right, so tell me more about the reverse pyramid diet. When you say that,
Sure,
people will
sure.
have different levels of familiarity with that kind of term. So tell us a bit about that.
Yes. So I work with a lot of different diets, but all of the diets that I work with are all have an ancestral basis. And when I was sick myself, for context for your audience, I was sick for 12 years with quote unquote irreversible things. I think we all know that that most things that are considered irreversible are not irreversible. They're simply irreversible with the tools that were given. However, I did the things that we're all told to do. I did the plant-based diet. I was vegetarian. I did vegan. I did raw, as many of us do. And I think it's very common for most of us to go there first because there's so much pervasive information about that. Even if you just go to the grocery store and you don't have access to a TV, all the food that's marketing itself as healthy will say healthy, and then it's something with vegetables or healthy grain products, right? And you see that on menu items as well. You never see healthy steak put together on a menu or on a label. And so I found that most people waste a lot of time in the healing game. And having been sick myself, I don't know about you, my goal is to keep people from going through that. I want people to have this knowledge immediately when they get sick so that they don't have to jump through the hoops and do a ton of experiments to try to get better. Not that that can't be a good experience. It was wonderful for me, but I would have rather learned that in the first year than at year 12.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can
Yeah.
certainly, empathize and get right alongside people who say, look, I've been through it myself. I've been unwell myself. I'm one of those as well. I've had every digestive disorder you could possibly think about in my life at some point or another before discovering carnivore, about 5 years ago now, in my case. But not just physical complaints. I had I had mental health issues like you wouldn't. Some people say I still have, to be fair, Mary. That full disclosure statement, but and things were a lot worse beforehand. We're talking serious debilitating anxiety. We're talking agoraphobia. We're talking bipolar. All of those kind of things. And yeah, just getting rid of the plants was to be, for full disclosure, I went keto about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, before it was cool and trendy, actually. I'm a pioneer, that's what I am.
You are
And
a pioneer.
Yeah, no, and it wasn't until 5 years ago that I finally kind of discovered the carnivore diet thing, under the influence of blokes like Sean Baker and those kind of characters. And yeah, Sean's great. And so I finally went fully carnivore, mostly carnivore, really, to be honest, about 5 years ago. And so far I've done one whole month of 100% carnivore, no plants, no garnish, no nothing. And I would absolutely say that people that are not getting the results that they think they should, and they think, well, I'm so close to carnivore, I should be getting really close to the results. It's not a linear relationship, is it, Mary? There's a real.
No.
As soon as you add 5% plants, you take 20% of your health away by doing that sometimes, or more. Is that what you're finding with these folks that you're looking at? What kind of anecdotes are coming back?
I'll speak to my patients first, because I've been working with the carnivore diet for over 10 years. And I had learned about it from Dr. Natasha McBride. She had talked about how in Russian medical schools, it's taught for schizophrenia and severe mental disorders, and it's been taught for hundreds of years. And so I jumped on that right away. I was the director for a mental health clinic, and so I was seeing lots of schizophrenia, bipolar, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, all those kinds of things. So I've been working with carnivore a lot from the get-go, and I found it to be extremely successful. Extremely. I think if people knew what they had in their tool chest, it would be the first line of defense. But the gradients among what one must do seem very small to someone who doesn't work in the nutrition world, but they're actually huge to the body. They're huge to the microbiome and the nervous system and the immune system. And so, yeah, very small, seemingly small changes, like what you just did, can make a massive impact. And that's not just with the carnivore diet. It's with a GAPS diet as well. Like if you go from like a Weston A. Price to a GAPS, or a junk food keto to a whole food keto, or a whole food keto to like to an ancestral. There's so many different gradients within each diet that you can do. And with the carnivore, I teach a multitude. I haven't sat down and counted them, but it has to do with what the person is dealing with and also the progress that they're getting. So when I get someone with, say, schizophrenia, we go just red meat, salt, and water. And then if it's someone with, say, Lyme disease or histamine disorders, sometimes we can do more, but it fully depends on the person. Classically, the carnivore diet that was taught by the Russians included some plants, but not fibrous plants. So you could have like tea, only herbal tea though, and not teas with long chain sugars. So they were very specific about what kind of teas. You could basically have like ginger tea and mint tea. But then when I go and study with carnivore tribes, it's very different. So there's lots of different gradients that you can do, and you've got to do the level in which you see the healing. If you're not seeing progress, then you've got to go deeper, and you've got to look a bit deeper.
Awesome. Okay. So the purpose of your trip to see these different folks over there in Africa, what was it that you were looking for specifically? What was the purpose of the trip overall? What did you find? Give us the rundown on all of that.
So for me, it was a bit of a passion project. So I've been traveling for the last several years, documenting groups all over the world. But this in particular trip was more of a passion trip. So I did document everything. I will use it later, I'm sure. But for me, I spent 4 years mostly bedbound with my illness. And I was really kind of at the end. My organs were going downhill quickly. And around that time, I had been doing, quote unquote, everything correct. And was getting much worse. And I stumbled upon Weston A. Price's work and specifically his book. And when I read about the Maasai, it turned my world upside down. It was eye-opening because I couldn't, my dad is a physicist, and I grew up kind of with a science-based mentality. My fun thing that I did, my like group that I did growing up was this science, math, engineering group that I did for several years as a kid. So I understood how to look at things, and that if something disproved a theory, that it wasn't a theory anymore. It transitioned it back to a hypothesis. And when I saw what the Maasai were eating and that they were in such perfect health, and also put that in light with the fact that they were living in one of the toughest environments, they were dealing with some of the worst infections and they weren't getting them, that told me they were onto something, and that flipped my world upside down. So that got me eating meat again, and organ meats, and I jumped full hog, as many of us do, and found Weston A. Price, and I improved a lot. I didn't go carnivore. People, I didn't know anyone doing that at the time, so I didn't know about it. Otherwise, I would have done it. But I went Weston A. Price, and I was already ketogenic and low carb. I had found that really helped with my neuropathy and things like that. And then maybe a year into that, I had improved a bit, and then I found the GAPS diet and did a very specific version of that, much more concise than what most people do. It was very strict, and then ended up going into remission. And so the Maasai, for me, their story, really, in many ways, I see them as saving my life. And their example to be a shining beacon of what human health can actually be, that we don't have to fall victim to infections, that we really aren't victims at all. We're just not doing the right thing. And so I've always wanted to go and see for my own eyes. It's one thing to read something out of a book, but you never know if what you read is actually true. So I wanted to see it myself. I wanted to share food with them. I wanted to see what they were like now, if things had changed since Weston A. Price had been there, and if the corn that had come into many of the communities had really denigrated their health, or how they were doing with that. So it was very much a passion project on my own. Now, one of the things I've wanted to do for a long time, and what I've been working on for years, is showing different communities around the globe really in perfect health. One, because people don't believe that perfect health is a thing anymore. Everybody has a condition. And two, to show that you can be healthy on lots of different protocols, but once you get sick, it's a very different story as to how you can recover. To try to help explain to people, okay, I'm Japanese, my great-grandparents ate rice, why can't I eat rice, kind of thing. So I want to have a good explanation for people, and I think there's a very logical explanation there. It's a very different thing to eat something when you're healthy than it is when you're sick.
So tell us about this tribe. What do they eat? What did you see while you were there?
Yeah.
Sure. And then maybe the dairy side of things as part of that as well.
Okay, sure. And I don't know your stance on dairy, actually. What is your stance on dairy? Do you have one?
Yeah, I do. My stance is that people need to be aware that milk, for example, contains a fair amount of sugar. So be aware of that if that's an issue for you. I'm not against dairy at all. A lot of people accuse me of a whole bunch of things, Mary, including they call me anti-dairy.
Sorry.
I'm not. Personally, I'm lactose intolerant. Okay, so milk is not an option for me. I can get away with cream when I'm drinking coffee, which I've cut back, by the way, from something like 7 buckets like this of instant coffee a day with 100 mils of cream in each one. I've cut back to like maybe 2 of those a week if you're lucky, or equivalent. So I've cut back massively on caffeine, and as such massively on cream and the attendant calories that come with the cream as well. Cheese occasionally, but not very much. Certainly none of the fermented style cheeses or anything like that. That's just, I just don't enjoy that at all. So that's not my speed. So really for me, dairy boils down to a bit of cream and a bit of cheese. But that doesn't mean I'm anti-dairy. There are people that say dairy saved my life. There are people that say raw dairy is the way to go, and homogenized dairy is the devil. And what I don't really take a stance on any of that stuff, Mary. I just go like, okay, n equals 1 for each of us. What works for you? It's not broken, don't fix it. If it is broken, have a look at it. So that's what my stance is. But anyway, Maasai, what are they?
Okay,
Let's do
so the
them.
Maasai, and I agree with you. So I do N1 with my patients, although I don't let them use milk, not because milk is a bad food, but because and milk has the kind of sugar that can feed overgrowth in the microbiome. And so if I'm trying to get someone better, it gets in the way. So I let them have butter, but I do, depending on how sick someone is, I'm real nerdy about it. It's like it has to be like raw and grass fed and from the right breed and all those kinds of things if someone is very sick. If someone's pretty well, then I'm loose on that, all of that. So as long as they feel good, but you have to go with what you feel, because I think traditionally dairy was a great food of sustenance for many people, but not everyone can break it down now, and there's reasons for that. So I had that too. I grew up not tolerating dairy, and luckily I tolerate it now. So with the Maasai, they do a lot of milk. They do often 2 cups is like a meal for them. So and then they do a lot of the blood and the meat, but they don't do them on the same day, which was fascinating. Something I didn't know before this trip. Yes. Yeah. So when they slaughter an animal, they eat far more meat than people say, by the way. Many accounts, especially on some of the blogs and things like that, will say that they eat meat like twice a month. I think they're talking about the dry season when the men are taking the cattle out and subsisting mainly on milk and blood, but that's actually not typical. They eat animals for at least half the week. So what they'll do, they'll slaughter a goat and eat it all at once. You eat the organs raw, many of them. So like the liver, the kidney, we ate raw. And then the rest were put into what they call a soup or a tea, but it's really creating a broth. That's what it is. There's no fiber in there. And they call it herb soup, but it's not. And they'll say herbs with an S, but it's actually not. So they do use one plant, although they will always say it in the plural for some reason, but it's one plant, and it's a root it's a root in a cactus. And you know what? I took the documentation for it so I can identify it, but it looks like it's in the cactus family. They don't eat the fiber. They just boil that with the organ meats, and it's very, very bitter. So to me, I'm theorizing or making a hypothesis. I think that's a natural aid to the digestive process. Bitters tend to aid in the digestive process, but also they tend to be antiparasitics. Of course, not all of them, but many. And these folks just don't get sick. They don't get the malaria and dengue and sleeping sickness that's around there. So anyway, so they do, when they slaughter a goat, they'll eat it all in one night. And then the next day they'll go to milk and blood for the next 3 days. So they'll do nothing but milk and blood. But they have that herb soup most nights, and they always have it after a kill because they use the organ meats to make it. So they'll always have it with the meat, and they have it as kind of like a dessert. None of these tribes honestly did any kind of dessert. They don't have a sweet tooth at all. So that's what they do. And then they'll do like 3 days of the milk and the blood, and then they'll do another animal. Now, when they do cows, when they slaughter a cow, they'll eat that for 3 days instead. It's a lot more meat, and they'll smoke it so that it lasts. But in general, everything is very, very fresh with the Maasai. They don't do the biltong. They don't do the jerkies. They don't do any of that. They're never hungry. They just eat when it's there, and they're not anxious. They don't get hangry, nothing like that. And yeah, that's kind of what they do. They eat in a very communal setting. They have a different diet for women when they're pregnant and post-birth, but the main difference is that they go from raw liver to cooked liver at the 6-month mark of pregnancy, and they go from raw dairy to cooked dairy. But they're very into the raw dairy. They do the butter for children. That's their first food. They give the children tons of raw butter, and then lots of blood. And I can say from experience, so I had the blood on its own. They killed a goat, and I was there for it. And they immediately went in while the goat was dying and drank from the goat, actually from the neck, and then poured it into a cup and gave it to me, and I drank it. And I was thinking it was going to taste minerally, or metally almost. It wasn't. It was sweet and like a dessert. And I cannot explain it, Bart. It felt like one of the most healing foods I've ever had. I'm from the Midwest. I don't know if that means anything, but we eat like all processed foods where I'm from. So this is a big jump. but it tasted like something I was missing my whole life. I can't explain it. Whereas when I had it with another Maasai tribe, I had it with the blood and the milk. So we went over there and did that mixture. So they mix it together when they're not doing the meat that day. And that I didn't enjoy as much, honestly. And Brian was different. Brian Sanders liked it better that way. So we may all be N1s with that, but I preferred it without the milk.
Okay. There's fascinating stuff.
Yes.
There's a couple of things that come out of that for me. The first one is I forgot to mention when I was talking about my dairy intakes, butter, of course. I don't even think of butter as dairy. Of course it is. It's made of cream. So yes, I eat a lot of butter as well. Secondly, on the cactus there, I think you're onto something in terms of the bitters there, the alkaloids and things that'll be in it. I'm wondering if it's related to that South African species that the warriors used to take to cleanse, to prevent infections ongoingly, and to suppress their appetite.
That could very well be.
I wonder whether it's, of course, if they're eating the way that you're describing, they won't have much of an excess appetite anyway, because there's no sugar to speak of. I mean, really, the only sugar there is in the raw milk to speak of.
Yes.
A very
Yes.
small amount in the blood, a very small amount in the animal meat, in the animal's muscle meats, I
Mhm.
would say. All your major vitamins and minerals and things are taken care of by your organs there. Um, Amazing that traditional wisdom, traditional knowledge there
Mhm.
at 6 months in pregnancy, swap to cooked for obvious reasons. You know, these guys don't need idiots in white coats with stethoscopes to tell them any of the stuff.
No,
They
and the
can
amazing
themselves
thing,
by
Bart,
experience.
yeah, the amazing thing is they really don't trust doctors. They don't trust modern food at all, mainly because of the shelf life. They don't trust anything that lasts. And they don't eat a number of foods. So, unlike other tribes around them or communities and clans, they don't do chicken, they don't do eggs, they won't touch fish. They think it's below them. And they don't do hunted game either. So, the Maasai are known for their hunting and their ability to kill, but it was hunting to protect their herd. It was only in a protection standpoint. It wasn't to procure meat. And they actually look down on people that hunt. They're kind of like the upper class, and there's even an origin story that goes throughout Tanzania that covers all 127 different tribes, filter into this origin myth, and they all tell it in their own way. But with the Maasai, they're kind of like the good brother. There's three brothers that God created, and the brothers were all given a large jug of milk, essentially. And the first brother drank the milk on the first night. And when God came in the next day, or the father came in the next day, the milk was gone. And he said to them, "You don't think of the future. You can't plant food, you can't raise animals. I'm going to put you in the forest where you have a constant supply of animals to eat." And so that was the Batwa, that's the pygmies, the hunter gatherers. And that would also, of course, account for the Hadza as well, which we should talk about because they weren't quite as healthy as the other ones, which was surprising. And they don't eat as many plants as people think either, which was also surprising. So we should definitely go into that. But the next brother drank half the jug of milk and left the other half for the next day. And so the father said to that one, "Go and tend to the fields. I'll give you animals to raise and vegetables to grow." And that was the Datoga, that's the Iraq, and many others that do half and half, where they do animal husbandry plus farming and agriculture. And then the last one was the Maasai. They didn't drink the milk at all. They were very responsible, and therefore they were given the royalties of the land. They were given the cattle to take care of, and they would never go hungry. So it's a really interesting origin myth that it accounts for all of the different tribes, and therefore none of them feel bad about themselves, for for not being future planners or for being future planners.
Right. Cool.
Mhm.
Yeah. The other thing that strikes me there, and it does kind of circle back to what we're talking about a bit there, is this whole thing where you're saying where basically they are not mixing their dairy with meats, they are mixing the dairy with blood.
Yes.
Now, if you mix dairy with meat, meat comes with fat, a lot of
Yes.
fat. You mix sugar and fat, hello Randall cycle, hello health
Mhm.
problems, hello metabolic disorders, hello obesity, hello heart disease, all of that.
Yes.
And again, they've worked this out through eons, generations of trial and error, I would say, and gone, you know what? When we have the milk, we can have blood with it, and that's fine because there's not much fat in blood. It doesn't carry a
No.
lot of with it. But if we mix our meats with all this fat, we eat a nice fatty goat or a nice fatty pig or a nice fatty cow, whatever it is, and we have milk that day by the cup load as well. Hello, we've got a problem. So that's fascinating to me that they've, and I didn't know that that's what they were doing until you said today. Obviously, it sounds like this is something that only they know about, and it's not in the accounts that we've read. So,
Yes.
I mean, that bit of information there alone, I think, makes your trip worthwhile, Mary. I think that's
I do
a huge
too.
public service.
I
It's
do too. That,
amazing.
yeah, that and the herb soup, because if I had just read about that, I would assume that they were eating leafy greens, like an herb in their soup. And I also would have assumed that it was multiple plants, but it's not. It's actually a tea, is really what it is. And it's how they eat the other organs as well. Like for instance, the soup that they were making. I mean, it had everything. It had the rectum with the poop coming out. Right. This is not a place with water. You don't wash things in any of these places. But that said, they're not dirty people. They're actually very elegant, and we never felt dirty there. Like once, things didn't seem dirty in any way, shape, or form. And the clothes were very like beautifully presented. The you don't really use dishes. You eat communally. So the meat is, and this is relevant too. The meat isn't stewed. It's not fried. It's not none of these things. They grab a stick from the field. They live kind of in a plains area at the base of Kilimanjaro, all around. I mean, they really spread through Uganda. They have different names, but they're really Maasai. So, like in Uganda, they're the Karamoja, and I was planning on going there, but there's a political issue in Uganda. I had to leave, and then so I'll get there next time. And then they go up through Kenya. But so it's low grazing acacia trees, really low down here, not the ones the giraffes eat. And there's elephants there, and there can be lions depending on which group you're with. But there's not trees, there's not jungles, it's not mountainous like many of the other tribes that I was visiting. But there are some sticks that go up to about shoulder height, really. And so they'll grab one of those from a walk. They do a lot of walking, and they'll pierce the meat with it and stick it next to the fire, and that's how they cook the meat. And then they'll take that stick and they'll put it in front of 4 or 5 people, a group of Maasai, or if we were there, it was us, and then there's another group next to us of Maasai, and then another group of Maasai. So they tend to sit in like people, like 4 to 5 people in a little pod, and then they put the stick with the cut of meat. We were given first the chest of the goat, which is very tough, and but it's usually what they give the children, and I think to develop strong jaws. Honestly, I can't imagine why else. But and then one person is peeling off one bite at a time with the knife and handing it to each person, and you have one bite, and then you wait your turn, and you have another bite, and they just keep providing and keep providing. So once we got past that, then they gave us the leg and kept moving on. But it's very communal, so you don't have plates, you don't have bowls, and those kind of things.
Cool. So yeah, all right. We've got vitamin B happening there with the entrails, etc., being involved in the herb soup, if you like. You've got
Yes.
you've got strong immune systems being shared communally around because of the shared sticks, etc. Um, no, so these people have probably got um, diverse and very strong microbiomes, hence very strong immune systems.
Yes.
Traditional wisdom, once again, showing that the thing that human beings have done for eons and eons is the thing that's most likely to lead us to a healthy existence. Um,
Yes.
so how does that leave you, Mary, feeling about stuff like the nitrogen 14, nitrogen 15 isotope testing that's been done on the skeletal remains of humans that tells us that human beings throughout 350,000 year existence on the planet have eaten almost exclusively the flesh and the fat of animals and basically no plants to speak of.
Yes, I'm not surprised, because when you have the animals, you can see, well, I should say this in the context of this last trip. With seeing these 9, 10 different communities, you could see variant degrees of health by the eye, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we asked them a lot of questions, and I took their blood sugar and their ketones and things like that, but you could see it from the eye that the more animal products they ate, the better they were, and the more protected they were. And the more of the agricultural foods they ate, the more prone they were to modern disease and modern infection. So for instance, I sat down, I was able to organize a council of elders that we could talk to. So this is just a ton of old people, basically. And this was in a farming community. So not like the Hadza or the Batwa or the Pygmies or any of these groups. So this is a farming community. And when they were young, they would eat meat 3 times a day and eat dairy on a daily basis. And that was typically goat or sheep dairy and butter. And now they were eating primarily maize instead of sorghum or millet. So they had switched to corn, and they were eating vegetable oil instead of butter, and they only ate meat very infrequently. It had gotten too expensive. And now they looked like our elders, maybe not quite as severe. They weren't in wheelchairs, but they had clear arthritis. They had lost their teeth. You know, they had all these issues. And when we asked them about their parents, they still had their longevity, by the way, but they were ill when they were old. And when we asked them about their parents didn't have any of those issues. And they died in their sleep of old age and had many generations below them when they died. Their children are far more sick, and their grandchildren extremely so. And specifically, when I say that, I mean to infections. What I often see in these communities when they start to adopt modern foods, and when I say modern foods, I actually only mean wheat processed the modern way, corn, and vegetable oil, because these communities aren't eating things like potato chips. They're not eating things like desserts and fast food and restaurant food, right? They're still cooking all their own food, usually on a fire. And so that's all that's come in. But you see the degradation, especially generationally, of the health to the ability to fight off infection. And this was the most obvious with the Batwa. So the Batwa were actually one of the, aside from the Maasai, who literally glow with health. They have no health issues at all. Their skin glows, their posture is incredible. They have all of this muscle, they're fleshy, you can tell they're never hungry, beautiful, beautiful teeth, bright eyes. I mean, and emotionally, one thing, because I worked so often in mental health and for so many years, I really look for the cues for mental illness, both in children, because I work with a lot of children, and also in adults. And there's just none. There's none. There's no anxiety. There's no depression. There's no autism. There's no attention issues. In fact, people are always shocked to hear that children don't have temper tantrums at all, because they're calm and they're happy and they're so socially comfortable that I can go into a group I've never met before that is not prone to tourists. They're not on the tourist track, right? There are some of these groups that are and some that aren't. And I can go and just pick up a child within 1 second. I don't have to say hi. I don't have to spend some time with it first. I can just pick up a child, put it in my arms, and it's going to sleep already. They're very calm children and happy children. So socially, they're very good. But in the Batwa, you could really see the difference in the immune function, because here are people, the Batwa, for those who don't know, they're part of the Pygmy group, and there's about 500,000 Pygmies left, all in Central Africa. Pygmies mean short, and it's not a derogatory term, I promise. So I asked all the Pygmies. So it's the Pygmy group, and then under that umbrella, there are different clans. So I was visiting the Batwa clan, which used to live in the Bwindi forest of Uganda. They've since been forced out in the early 90s due to the new laws creating the Bwindi forest and protecting the gorillas. We can go into that if you want. I actually think most of the issues that are going on, at least in this region of Africa, are due to the humanitarian and environmental efforts that are destroying people's health. And we can go into that later if you want. But with the Batwa, we met people that had 6 living generations and people that were well over 100. And I want to put a clause with that. So a lot of times when you get people's age in many of these communities, you don't really know. It's the same with the Greeks. You don't really know. But especially with groups like the Maasai, they don't celebrate birthdays. They don't mark them. So the only way that we've come even close to knowing how old they are now is because they've been forced into the school system. So we know within 5 years of how old they are, right? Because they can't be 0 going into kindergarten. So we can make a pretty good guess, and that would be the case even for the 70 and 80-year-olds because they've been going to school. So we know about how old they are. But with the Batwa, they actually do traditionally register birthdays and celebrate that. And so you do actually know with them, but you can also see the generations. So, we had a woman who's 120 with her sister still alive, one of her daughters still alive at 93, then, 5 more generations after that. And they're just in peak incredible health. These old ladies, those 3 old ladies, and there were many other elders in the community. So I'm not cherry picking. There's a lot of elders in the Batwa community. They all grew up in the forest, hunting and gathering, and mostly hunting, to be honest. They talked about how they ate meat 3 times a day, every season of the year, that meat was plentiful, that they would have honey during the short season, and some berries for about 3 months a year, and some root vegetables for about 4 months a year, but they would eat meat consistently throughout the year and every day and with each meal. And when they were forced out of the forest, they now live on the edge, and they're not farmers. They don't know how to do this. They also have no money. They're not from a financial system. And so they're really in a bit of a pickle for food. And so their meat consumption has gone down to twice a year. Holidays. They get it for 2 holidays a year. That's it. And somehow the elders have maintained their health. The 3 old ladies I was mentioning could hop 2 feet in the air and pound the ground and dance for 15 minutes straight and not be out of breath afterwards. It was an incredible, it was an incredible argument against arthritis being normal in age. I'll tell you that. These women had 0 arthritis, and it wasn't like we saw them on one day. We spent 3 days with them, and each day they danced, and they were in wonderful spirits. They were really physically in incredible health, and they talked about how things had changed through the generations with living outside of the forest. So there were some young children there, and by the end, I didn't want to be rude, so I waited until the last day to ask them about them, because some of the young children around 3 or 4 had some of those parasite bellies. It was clear, it was very clear that it wasn't malnourishment. They had fleshy faces and arms with muscles and all of that, and bright eyes and fantastic teeth, some of the best teeth you've ever seen. But they had the parasite bellies. And so we asked them if they knew what it was. And they said, oh, it's the worms. The nurse comes in and treats them every so often. And we asked them if they grew up having that, and they were like, nope. And then they went on to say, and one day I'll cut up this footage, so I got it there, but they went on to say that actually none of their children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren had ever had parasite bellies. It's only this new generation that's getting them. One thing I've seen over and over again, Bart, is that the further down the generational line on modern foods, the more weak the system. So the children that I treat now are prone to things that my generation was not, right? Like pandas and these kind of things. And you could really see it in the Batwa. Of course, they're still not getting the chronic disease. They're still not getting the infertility. They don't even have period pain, which I know that means nothing to you, but to women out there, they're going to be shocked. They're still not getting the autoimmunity, the cancers. They don't die at young ages. If they die, it's usually in their sleep when they're old still. They don't tend to get the infections and die. They do get infections though, now, as you can see from the parasite bellies. And they talked about that as well. The younger the generation, the more infections they got. And they're in a pretty a harsh place in that they don't have clean water. So there's lots of diphtheria, there's lots of parasites. And so, before on their traditional diet, their immune system protected them, and their immune system was strong enough to fight those things off. I really think that's what it is. And now it's not. So the Batwa are different than the other hunter-gatherers that I've met in that they had lots of medicines, but all of their medicines were for something immediate, not chronic. It was for like a headache or a belly ache if someone got that, and they were rarely used, but they had lots of different plants, whereas many of the groups had one plant that they use and not many.
So they didn't have statins and ACE inhibitors then?
No, yeah, no statins.
Oh dear.
No heart disease. Yeah.
Okay, so again, it's all pointing towards the further away we get from natural situations, natural food, natural interaction and integration to the natural environment and exposure to these things, the more our health seems to suffer.
Yes. Yeah. And lifestyle ways too. Like what you mentioned earlier, the bacterial exchange is extensive. So if we circle back to the Maasai, the ladies do the milking in the mornings, and they sing this beautiful song when they're doing it. And the animals in all of these communities, with the exception of the Hadza, glowed with health. I've never seen such healthy animals before. The Hadza's animals, they did not look healthy, but that's for a different reason. But with the Maasai, when the women were milking, they invited me in to try to join. I was terrible. I'm not a farmer. I would love to be one if anyone wants to teach me, but I was terrible at it. Anyway, as they were milking the cow, the calf came up and was licking all over the nipple that we were using, and the foam of the bacteria, of the saliva, everything was going into the milk that we were drinking, and no hand washing, no sterilization, no heating of the milk, none of that. That was immediately brought over. And then they have a very fast and non-painful way to get the blood out of the cow. They have an arrow that has they put a little cob on it, about an inch in, half an inch in, so that the arrow can only barely tap in. It's really like getting a blood pool, is really what it is. It would be like us going to get a blood draw at the doctor's. And they did that, and then the blood started spurting out, and they caught it into a calabash squash, which they don't eat, by the way. They just use to carry liquids. And then they caught that, and then they mixed the blood and the milk together. They put some of the dirt from the ground, which also has stool, right, and ash in it, and patched up the wound for the cow. And the cow, by the way, was not hurt or startled or upset. Neither were its friends. And then the cow went on its way, no weaker, and everyone joined in on the blood and the milk. So lots of bacteria being exchanged, and everyone. They would give some people cups, but the cup that, let's say I gave you a cup of it, it would dip into the big pot of the blood and the milk mixture, and then you would drink it, and then you would dip back into that and give it to someone else. So a constant exchange of bacteria from each of the members, all the animals, the dirt. Yeah, it's not sterile. It's not sterile. So we have gotten away in lifestyle. We've gotten away in our community ways. And I think some of that is because of the mental illness and the mental issues that come with a modern diet and a modern microbiome and a modern way of living. It makes us want time to ourselves, which is not a thing in traditional society. No one is ever alone in a traditional society.
Okay. Am I also right in assuming that these folks are almost invariably walking around barefoot the whole time?
Mostly. They'll wear sandals. And I don't understand it, because there are thorns this big that will go straight through our shoes, and they seem fine. And also the thorns are going at your legs and your arms, and they're just bare-armed, bare-legged. The Maasai have made more modern shoes now out of tires. So they're like a sandal, a flip-flop. And a sign that a Maasai boy has become a man is that they have a back strap on the sandal so that they can run if they have to hunt a lion. But the boys just wear like a flip-flop style, and the tire is smart because it scoops up. So it's actually rounded like this, and it goes beyond the toes by about 3 inches. And therefore they can step in mud and stool and things like that, and the feet don't get too dirty with that. So that's been an effective way. They would have been made out of leather before, but now they're made out of tire.
Okay. And sleeping, they sleep on a mat on the ground, or what?
Each of the tribes is different with that. So the Maasai sleep on the ground, the Datoga elevated on a bed made of sticks that's about 2 feet high, and then a cowhide, and same with the chaga. And the Batwa and the Hadza sleep on the ground, just on a bit of fur, is what they do. Um, there's something that you said there that I felt like I should speak to, and I totally lost it. Uh, yeah, so they tend to all sleep together. They do cuddle puddles. All of the groups do. Really, really tiny cuddle puddles. They have small beds, and yet the whole family sleeps on them.
So all of that about bare feet and sleeping on the ground, I'm thinking of electrical grounding, electrical earthing.
So you just reminded me what it was. So I'll speak to it so I don't lose it again, because I think you'll like this. The kids are all barefoot and never ever wear shoes anywhere I go. So the kids are barefoot, with the exception of if they're going to school, they have to, but they hike everywhere barefoot. And this is a region with snakes. I mean, we passed a very fresh black mamba trail. There are snakes and deadly spiders, but no one seems too concerned at all. The children could die at any moment. They're like walking on cliffs, they're by fires, they're handling knives all the time and peeling potatoes at age 2. They call everything a potato. So
completely unlike the Bronx.
What's that?
Completely unlike the kids in the Bronx, for example, who couldn't not die at any time. So
completely different. And no one's worried about them. They don't go into the fire. They don't get hurt. And the bacterial exchange even there. So yes, they are definitely on the ground. Everyone is. You sit on the ground all the time. Your flesh is on the ground. If I had gone there coming from America and I wasn't around people who had grown up there, I would have been covering my whole body and not sitting on the ground or sitting in plants where, insects can bite you and give you disease. And they're in those places all the time. So I was too. I felt comfortable because they were comfortable, right? And that was normal for them. The children they all potty train very early because they don't wear diapers. It's a brilliant method for anyone out there with kids. Just keep your kids naked. They potty train very quickly, sometimes even by 6 months, as crazy as that sounds. So the children will be like peeling some of the food. These are non-Maasai, obviously, because they're eating some of the root vegetables like the taro and the sweet potato or the cassava. They'll be peeling some of the food with a big knife that could hurt anyone. and then they'll like pee and everybody's walking through that. And it's just a huge bacterial exchange and lots of grounding, lots of sleeping on the ground. There's nothing really in between with the exception of the Maasai who wear those rubber shoes. And they also will go around barefoot elsewhere as well. And the homes are made of earth. So everywhere you go, whether it's the Chaga, the Maasai, the Hadza, everyone makes the home out of earth or trees.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so fascinating stuff. I've learned a lot of things in the last 45 minutes or so that I didn't know, and I thought I was pretty well read on these folks. So obviously nothing like a fresh pair of eyes actually going and seeing what really does go on. Thank you very much for sharing all of that information with us. I think it reinforces what we here in this community, in this carnivore community, absolutely know to be true. And that is that there is a natural design. There is a way that we have evolved as a species. There is a specific ecological niche for us. And I'm sorry, vegans, but it looks like you're wrong. It looks like you're so
a vegan would go very hungry in anywhere I've been in Africa, that's for sure.
Yeah. If they even survived 5 minutes. Incredible stuff. So yeah, thank you very much for that. What do you want to leave us with? What was your overall most important message, or what do you want to leave us with today?
Well, I'll tell you, this is a very different trip for me. I've been to Africa many times. I've been to different regions, and I've been all over the world studying with traditional cultures. And I had a very different takeaway from this trip. The blatant perfect health that I saw. People dying from old age, not from being sick until old age, not getting sick at 40, 50, 60. The blatant perfect mental health, the the beautiful teeth without a dentist, the immunity to infection when on a traditional diet was in such contrast. When I came back, so I see about 60 people a week in practice. And when I came back, I've always been extremely uplifted by my work. Like I've not once ever had a day at the end of my day where I am exhausted or downtrodden. I always have more energy. And I did not feel that this time because the sadness and the contrast of how sick people are and how normal we think it is to have a laundry list of symptoms, to wake up in pain, to have a ton of medications, to constantly be going to doctors, to never feel good or vital or healthy for decades. It's become so normal and common, and the contrast was really incredible. So my takeaway from this was that perfect health is our natural state, and that is attainable. I've seen it, you've seen it. People get their health back all the time. It's not always fast, but it happens. We just have to give the body exactly what it needs. And the best building block for the body are animal proteins and animal fats. There's nothing stronger. I mean, the human cell, that's all they can use is fat and protein anyway. And the carbohydrates are extra. They can be enjoyed when you're healthy, essentially, but they're really an extra. So the takeaway was very diet related. Often people will ask me if I think it's mostly lifestyle. And in my practice with my patients, I teach both. I do about 50-50 lifestyle and diet. I find both to be imperative to get someone better. But I do think it's fully diet, actually, for these tribes when they're losing their health, because all of their traditions are staying the same, except for the food. When you start to see the being prone to infection and that kind of thing, they're still getting all the daylight. They still don't have electricity. They're still cooking on the fire. They're still communal living, all of that. So I think diet is really key. And I think the more sick you are, the closer you want to get to an animal-based diet. With these different tribes that I saw, you could see like what someone can do at different stages of illness and get better, right? Like the Maasai diet is kind of like the PhD of diets. I would put some of the Russian tribal diets with that as well. And then the Chaga diet is more of like okay, I'm healthy. I've been healthy for a long time. This is a maintenance diet. My body can do this and stay healthy on it. But I don't think someone could get healthy on a Chaga diet. So there are different tools that can be used at different times, and they're all obviously safe to do for a lifetime because they're traditional diets.
Brilliant. And it takes us back full circle to what I was saying at the start, doesn't it? Which was my 90% adherence to carnivore for 5 years didn't get me there.
No, and I've got to say, yeah, I was so close to the diet that healed me too, and it was like a 5% change. It was basically going from lots of organ meats, lots of animal fats, a traditional kind of Weston A. Price but low carb diet with sweet potato maybe once every 3 weeks, to simply taking out the starches and going into remission. So very small changes, even if you're only doing something every few weeks, every couple of months. To the microbiome, it's not small. It keeps the bacteria alive. And if it's a fiber issue, which it often is, that's tearing up those little villi that need to regrow for the good bacteria to live on. So a seemingly small change can actually be your ticket.
Massive. Right. Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. So folks that want to contact you, want to consult with you, how do people get hold of you, Mary?
Sure. So Enable Your Healing is my website, and I've got Instagram, Mary Ruddick CNC. I have a YouTube channel with a few videos on it. Just look my name up on YouTube. I'll be having a ton. I have footage for 3 years of going to all these places, but I'm not an editor and my time is very limited. So I'll get that up at some point.
Awesome. We will look forward to that footage. I, for one, would love to see your video footage from your trip. What you've shared with us this evening, my time, this morning, your time, Mary, has been absolute gold. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for it. And I'm sure that all nearly 15,000 of my supporters will thank you for it as well, because it absolutely is a slam dunk, and it just shows us that we really, really have got this right, and we really, really are on the right path. So thank you for that. I'd love to have you back time if you're free sometime in the next few months, where we can.
I'd love to.
even if we can get you in and we can go live to air and have people come and ask you questions on the fly.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite. Let's do it. Yes.
So,
And I
all
want
right.
to say too.
I'll have my people call your people.
Awesome. That's perfect. I want to say too, after this experience, I started an organization called Cows for Kids with Brian Sanders. We're really trying to launch this because there's these regions, all these groups that we've gone to that are on their traditional diet, except for when the kids go to school. The schools are feeding them corn and beans and vegetable oil. So we're going to, what I want to do, I spend my life undoing illness, right? Helping people recover. And I want to help prevent it from starting. And there's these regions where there's no illness where this can be stopped, but not if the kids continue to eat the beans and the vegetable oil. So I'm going to start with the Maasai village. So I've sponsored them and I'm providing animals for their school. And then we're doing the Chaga and then also the Batwa community as well. So if anybody wants to be involved, we're going to arrange for people to be able to go and visit and all of that. And I'm putting together an educational program so that they keep their wisdom about their diet, because they're really getting programmed that corn and beans and vegetable oil are healthy. And so I'm going to, I've already talked to them. We've arranged everything, but we'll go in and keep that wisdom alive in their troops so that they don't become like us.
Awesome. All right, here we go. Mary Ruddick, nutritionist, researcher, and philanthropist. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. We'll talk.
It's been a pleasure.
Soon. As I say, I'll have my people call your people. These are my people. His name's Yellow Ted. He's my agent. We'll be in touch to organise the meeting for a live chat. Of course, folks who support my channel, if you want Mary back for a live stream, you're going to have to super chat us $100 each so that we can bring that across to get some cows over there for the kids.
We got to get cows for the kids. The kids need, yes, the meat and the milk. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, Yellow Ted will take his cut of any. Of
course, as he deserves. Yes.
So yes. He gets very stroppy if he doesn't get what he wants, does Ted. Anyway, I won't hold you up. Thanks so much, Mary. It's been a pleasure, as I said. Yeah, I've learned so much, and I'm sure everybody else has too. Catch you next time. See you then.
See you then.